my end, it sounds like it's compressing a little bit. I hate compression.
I told him recently. I did, Bo. I told our media peeps. I was like, dude, when I get to going and people stop clapping while I'm really going after it, I know you got the compression too high. Stop it.
Get off the compression. Get off the
I
compression.
said, if I blow the speakers, I'll buy new ones.
Right? Right? Exactly. I feel that, man. I feel that. We've got troubles being in the gym right now. It's a real challenge.
Oh.
It's a real challenge.
Hey, there's Pastor Richard. First comment.
Look at him.
Yeah.
Coming in strong from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
What are your challenges? Just echo and
well, honestly, I mean, truthfully, the sound quality is actually pretty amazing.
Seriously?
Surprisingly amazing, but we have to keep it. The risk is really high.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, we have to keep it really compressed and really down. Yeah. So there's a lot of times. And two, do you use a headset mic?
No, I used to, but
So I use a headset mic and I love it, but it's really hard to control in this environment. And so, like, when service really gets hammered,
mm-hmm.
you can kind of see people looking like, I don't know what he's saying. I can't hear it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I'm like, can I tell you how I know the compression is too strong? When I'm yelling and hollering and I stop and just start talking and it gets louder when I'm talking like this than when I'm
Yeah, right.
If I lower my input volume and it increases the volume in the house, too much compression, fellas.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we have the problem where, like, when I come up at the end of worship,
mm-hmm.
Worship's going and it's kicking and whatever. And then I'll get up and start saying something and nobody reacts and responds. I'm like, okay,
like,
they can't hear a thing that's going on.
They cannot hear a thing.
No idea. All right, so we'll get everything rolling here with shares.
Share.
Are you sharing?
Share and share alike. That's my motto.
That's what I'm talking about.
I just made that up.
It's powerful. Sharing it to like 47 groups. You're the king of sharing it to all these groups.
I know, but sometimes it doesn't work well. Not that sharing it to all these groups. See, oh man, so frustrating. So you know what I could do here? I could share it to my page. Here, let's do this. There. Oh, see, it's got me on the Dillingham group. See, on my computer, it's so much easier for me to see who I am. So it's got me. So it says we're live, but it's got me on. Okay, so here, posting as. How do I do that?
Yeah, it should have a little button at the bottom you can push on your phone.
I know, right?
Little button you can switch it up. Who you want to switch? Who you want to share it as?
More options. No. Stupid thing. So I go to the Dillingham group and it puts me in as like I'm a leader in the Dillingham group or something.
Technology's hard, isn't it? Are you on your phone or on your computer?
Phone. It just says here, popular posts. Your post with the most likes, comments, and shares. And I got Jay Jones right here.
Jay Jones.
Mobilized Church, episode 107, interview with Pastor Jay Jones. That's pretty cool.
Let's go. Man, where's everybody at this morning, bro? Where's everybody at? Let's go. Come on, man.
We're not going to start until...
We need Pastor Tony Richard to rally the troops for us.
All right. I'm ready to go whenever you are, bro. I'll
You
just do
know,
this.
it is amazing. If we hosted a podcast,
Yeah.
if we did,
We started like this.
if we did a live Facebook video on conspiracy theories, we'd probably have 75, 80 people show up.
I know, right?
I'm just saying.
That's for real. I saw somebody the other day. They were doing a live. It was like a Facebook live, and there were, I don't know, 3, 4, 500 people that had joined them. Um, and I was like, we ought to have that person as a guest. And then I'm like, I don't
Never
know.
mind.
Man, I don't know if our philosophies jive enough. But we
Right.
could do it. We could do like a like some of those that where they do like the old Hannity and Combs. We could do one of those.
Bring them on and yell back and forth.
Yeah.
Be awesome.
You're out of your ever-loving mind. Where'd you come up with that stupid idea?
Be like Skip Bayless and whatever they have there.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes.
So I just got a text from Hummel, and he was asking if we're on yet.
He said I missed 5 minutes.
There we go. There we go.
There we go.
All right. So maybe there was a little Facebook glitchy.
Shadow banning us.
Dude.
Suckers.
They can't stop us, bro.
Hey, they can only hope to contain us.
You know that's what I'm talking about. In fuego. All right. You ready?
Let's rock it.
Let's get rolling, and people can, if you know, those that are on, they can help us. They can share, do all that good stuff, and that's gonna help us. So, okay. Here we go. You ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mobilized Church Podcast. This is Chris Dillingham alongside my big brother, Ken Dillingham Jr. the third. What is happening with you on today, my brother?
Just enjoying I'm enjoying the weather.
Man, right?
These are the days.
This weather.
These are the days. If it was like this, people would be like, Tampa. They got a lake called Erie. I go up and
it is a beautiful thing. Although, man, I tell you this, like, dude, I haven't been able to breathe for like about 6 weeks, man. It's crazy right now. The allergies and all this stuff is kicking in. So it is beautiful weather, but you know, you can't have everything, I guess. So it's all good. I got to get in some golf, man. Golf weather's it's slipping by, bro. I feel it. You feel it?
It is. It really is. And the first thing that happens, the first thing that goes is your ability to find your golf ball.
The leaves start falling.
And then it's like, wow, I didn't realize how many fairways I didn't hit this year. Because they they blow off the fairways, right? They keep the fairways clean. It's like, well, hit the fairway, you can find your ball. It's like,
no doubt.
Fairways.
Anybody can do that. Like, come on now, take special.
I'd be on tour if I hit fairways.
Exactly. Well, we're excited to get rocking and rolling this morning. I think we're shadow banned.
Yep.
I don't know. I think maybe.
What did we say?
Maybe it's our title for today's episode.
Oh yeah, could be.
Right?
Could be.
So they saw what the title's going to be and thought, oh no, we got to shadow ban that. So I tell you what, let's fight against the system today.
Let's do it.
Hit the share button. Just send it out to anybody and everybody, right? Like put it on every forum, every group that you're a part of. Just go ahead and hit the share button, get that out there. And we do appreciate those that are jumping on and being a part of this and watching today. Ken, we got a lot of really, really good things happening. Got a lot of really good things going on.
It's true.
And some exciting things. Getting ready to head to California to speak to some church planners. We're excited about that. Going to be with our man, Pastor Mike Hanks. That's going to be jamming.
Be so fun. It is going to be. It's absolutely going to be fun. And I'm excited about today's topic. And you know what? I'm sharing it to these places. And I'm just thinking, like, I'm sharing our podcast to these places. And they're like, why are you sharing Why are you sharing your podcast? I'm like, because you joined me to your group.
You invited me.
You joined me. Some of them just joined me.
I know. How's that happen?
I'm like in these groups. I'm like there was one called like United in Prayer, which like I want to be united in prayer. I don't know how I got there. So
That's
you know
my
what?
man. That's my man, Doug Smith. I think that's my man, Doug Smith. I think so. I think that's his group.
I'm like, I don't know how I got there, but guess what? Didn't get our podcast.
Yeah. That's so awesome, man.
It's
Well,
so true.
today, you know, you might get kicked out some of those groups today.
Well, there's
All right.
more than one way to skin a cat. I'm like, why did they even come up with that phrase? Skin a
Right.
cat. There's more
I
than
mean,
one
I'm
way
not
to
a
pluck a chicken. I mean, that'd probably even be a better, don't you think that would be a better statement, like a better euphemism?
okay, but here's the deal. Have you ever skinned a cat?
Or have I plucked chicken?
But listen, I've skinned a cat, bro.
Stop it.
No, for real. So I took advanced biology with Mr. Jameson. Remember Mr. Jameson? He looked like Harley Race. He had the afro. He looked just like Harley Race, the professional wrestler.
He did.
And I
He
took
had like
advanced
he looked like a mixture between Bob Ross and Harley Race.
He did. It was
Yep.
the love child of Bob Ross and Harley Race. And so no, we had our class, advanced biology, bro. We dissected animals the whole year, and the last assignment was dissecting a cat. And this was Mr. James. Now you could never get by with this. Speaking of offensive, we probably get blind for this.
Yes.
But he had a deal that you got an automatic A for the best cat puppet with the fur. So you had to peel the fur off, and whoever could like peel it completely off and do like a cat puppet with the eyes or whatever would get an automatic A. Oh man. How awesome is that? So
Hey,
there is
that's
more
a
than one
teacher.
way to skin a cat.
That is awesome. That's a teacher that's been there too long.
Absolutely. He's just making stuff up now.
Can you imagine the dude whose dad's a taxidermist? Mr. Jameson be like, bro, now that's impressive.
That's not even fair. Oh man. Oh my goodness. Hummel had a good comment. This is going. You ready? Harley Race and Bob Ross. That paints a picture to wrestle with. Come on, man.
True. That's true.
That's awesome. All right, man. We ready to rock and roll today? We might as well just come out of the gate telling cat stories. I'm not a cat fan, so like, you know, I was gonna say I apologize to our cat people. I don't. Cats are looking for a way to just kill you. That's the bottom line. They're plotting your demise. So I'm not a cat guy. So
oh my Lord. Hey, so the other day, before you do the 3, 2, 1, welcome.
We already did that.
We did
This is part of our show, man. This is our show. This is going on the final cut, man.
The whole deal with the cats and everything. You might want to do another 3, 2, 1.
Oh man, no.
We were walking.
Dude.
I was walking the dog the other day. I've got a picture of it. I was walking the dog the other day, and all of a sudden, and the dog's just trying to go potty. Come on, man. The dog's just trying to go potty, and the cat's walking with us. The cat is.
Oh my word.
The cat takes a walk with it. It's the hilarious deal. She watches us take off, and then here comes the cat. And so the cat was sitting in the middle of the road and saw the dog and starts meowing, like with no breaks between meows, right? So
right.
I'm not going to do that, but you can just visualize. And that cat's just meow, meow, meow. And the dog is like, for real? I'm trying to go potty here. The cat
can get a little privacy.
Right. And so finally the cat walks over the edge and the dog starts getting low to the ground. Like, I'm going to take you out. It's so funny.
That's awesome. Annie gonna take him out?
Annie was like, it's your day, cat. I hope you got a few of them 9 left because
that's awesome. That's awesome. All right, yeah. So that's part of the intro, bro. Like you can't get this content anywhere. Nobody, you know what I'm saying? So this is all good stuff. So I think it flows perfectly with our topic for today.
That is true.
You
That
know?
is true. Well, let's stop with the suspense. Let's let our audience know.
The tease, we're teasing, man. Trained professionals. All right,
Yes,
so today, what we want to talk about, since what we've already done is we've offended all the animal lovers in the group.
true.
Um, you know, we live in a world. So here's the topic for today. I'm going to set it up and I'm going to throw it to you, and maybe you can share, kind of how we got on this topic in this
Okay.
conversation. But we live in a world that, um, eh, again, I don't want to sound like grumpy old men. This isn't the grumpy old men podcast,
Oh, we're
and
not grumpy,
not
aren't we?
grumpy. We're happy. Like,
Look at our
dude,
smiles.
look at us. this has been an awesome prelude to our show.
Mhm.
So we're not grumpy, but here's the truth. We live in a world that has become increasingly sensitive, particularly as it pertains to like language, the things that we say, speech
Yeah.
and beliefs, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
There's the introduction of hate crimes, um, adding extra punishment because of the kind of what drove that crime. Um, and there gonna be a whole conversation about all of that. But we live in a world that has become increasingly sensitive to
Mm,
speech and to beliefs. And we've talked about the cancel culture and all of that kind of stuff. And so it seems like we live in a world, Ken, where
mhm.
people get offended about everything.
True.
Get offended about every single thing. And the Bible says that it's easier to win a walled city than it is an offended brother. And
Yes.
we live so I believe that spirit of offense. I'm not saying shouldn't say necessarily spirit of offense, but the spirit of the age has kind of led us into this mentality of easily being offended about different things, about what people think,
Yeah.
about what they believe, about what they say, and whatever.
Yeah.
And it's led to cancel culture and all this kind of stuff. So I want to set it up. So we live in that world of sensitivity, that what we say and what we believe is hateful and it's violence, and yet the gospel of Jesus is it's not like a contrarian. And I don't want to present an image of like, stick it up your nose or whatever, but the gospel confronts places in our lives that violate the value system of the kingdom, right? Like
Mm.
like the message of repentance is, you're doing this is the value system of the kingdom, and it confronts us with those places. And so we want to talk today about how do we navigate through these really difficult waters where the gospel is designed to confront those places in us, because that's what produces change in us. But we live in a world that hates that kind of confrontation about what they believe and about what they want to see in the world and about all those different things. A world
Yeah.
that hates that. So let's just throw it to you and kind of maybe set that up for us today.
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny because um in the past years, there was a lot of talk about there were some pretty famous talk show hosts who used the Orwellian, George Orwell's novel, uh, 1984, if you
Oh
remember.
yeah. Yeah.
And in that book or novel, there was a concept called the thought police, think
Mhm.
pull, the think pull. Are the then they're the and so they're the secret police in George Orwell's classic 1984, the super state of Oceania or Oceania, Oceania, and they try to uncover. So instead of like the old days, when you had the these guys that were FBI guys, and they were going after the gangsters. You know, those old movies, you know, where they had these gangsters had set up the mafia, you know, whatever, and they had these uh controls of these cities and whatever. And so there were these detectives and police departments and all that were going after these mafia rings, trying to break up organized crime, right?
Yeah.
And and so they would, and so what they would do is they would go after and uncover. And I think this is interesting because I think that book 1984, I if I'm not mistaken, I think it was written in like 1940, I don't know, 48 or 49 or something like that. So it wasn't, it was kind of on the heels of an era, you know, if you think
Yeah.
about that.
Sure.
It was kind of on the heels of an era where there were um, these organized crime syndicates.
Yeah.
And
1949.
49, yeah. And so there were these families, right? The families that were these various crime syndicates, and then some of the families, this family was fighting that family, and they were trying to, you know, get a larger territory and so on and so forth. But all of it so that they could do organized crime, which was their basically source of revenue. Um,
Sure.
and so they controlled things. And so what happened? Well, there were police departments and you know, famous, what was the guy, the from Chicago that was, oh man, he had a secret place up somewhere near, not far from you, where he had a hideout not far from Toledo, and very, very famous
Capone.
gangster, Al Capone, I think it was. And so what happened was you hear these stories about them, you know, them trying to get somebody, and they arrest somebody and they start taking them down little by little, and they start pulling back the layers, and this one tells on that one, and so on and so forth. And and what are they trying to do? They're trying to they're trying to remove the reign of these crime family syndicates.
Hmm.
Well, what's interesting is in Orwell's book, 1984, written, you know, sort of at the end of that era, you know, I think 20s, the roaring 20s, the 20s, 30s was the real big period of time for that kind of thing. And of course, it still goes on today. But I think what's interesting is about that is that Orwell actually takes this concept, but the thought police in his book weren't going after actual criminals. They were actually trying to find and uncover the people whose thinking and their way of thinking, their personal and political thoughts were unapproved, right, by the
Hmm.
regime.
Hmm.
And so they used criminal psychology, right? And they used surveillance and informers and all of these things, and they tried to find these people. And basically what it was in Orwell's book was he was projecting that there's coming a day where people are going to try to not let you think things that aren't approved.
Mm.
And so, so that was, you know, the thought police was, that idea of the thought police was something that was a pretty popular topic on a lot of talk shows and whatever in the early 2000s, you know, 2000 to 2010 and all. And what was funny is it was sort of the precursor to this period of time where basically people, they seemed to have an opinion that if you communicate an idea that they don't hold to or that they don't believe personally,
Yeah.
that's offensive to them.
Right.
In other words, I don't agree with what you're saying. I don't like what you're saying. That's offensive to me. And so there's almost a culture today, just sort of to flesh out your opening remarks. There's kind of a culture today, isn't there, Chris, where the idea is a little bit, you know, if you say something that confronts me, that is against worldview sensitivities, then
Yeah.
that is hate speech.
I wanna dig into as you're talking there, just kinda, I don't know, just feel directed and was thinking about this, about, obviously we wanna talk about it, about how to deal effectively in our world where we
Yeah.
know that there are gonna be positions that we hold. As a matter of fact, I saw a clip on Twitter, this morning. Oh, man, what's her name? Leela Rose or something like that, that does the pro-life stuff, whatever. I guess she was on
Yeah,
Dr.
something like
Phil,
that. Uh-huh.
and, um, man, the lady that was asking the question, she was like, "No," asking the question, just you could see the anger just building up, and I think her last name is Rose, I know that.
Lila or
Yeah, yeah. She was super calm and just answering the questions beautifully. But it didn't matter. She was talking about, the most vulnerable. Our responsibility as a culture is to protect the most vulnerable. And who's more vulnerable than the unborn?
uh-huh.
And the way she said it was full of compassion. It was kind. It was not judgmental. It wasn't critical, but like you could just sense and feel in that little clip, like just this anger and this angst. So we want to talk about that. We have positions that we're gonna hold from Scripture. You have a responsibility to hold the value system of the kingdom, regardless of what conventional wisdom says or regardless of what culture says.
Mhm.
That we got to make sure that it doesn't produce kind of an anti culture,
Yeah,
right? Like
like a
like a
hostility,
yeah, like we're coming back at
yeah.
them and we're pushing back, and
Mhm.
maybe even talk a little bit about like kind
Yeah.
of this challenge that we face of our Americanism, wanting to protect our
Mhm.
our patriotism and whatever. But as you were talking there, Ken, something just kind of struck me, and I think we need to deal with first. Before you can make disciples, we have to first be the disciple.
So true.
And I think we need to kind of maybe just address this reality that this the spirit of this age, we're influenced, whether we know it or not. We are influenced by the culture around us and by the spirit of the age. And oftentimes, I've said this for a really long time, that sometimes we preach against like the visual things that we can see from worldly activities and whatever.
Yeah,
But sometimes the most dangerous are not the visible things, but it's the thinking,
that's
right?
so true.
The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're mighty through God, the pulling down of strongholds, bringing every thought into captivity, right? Every high thing that would exalt itself against the knowledge of Christ, like it, all of those strongholds have to do with the mind. So I want to throw it to you, and I want to just kind of ask this question: as disciples of Jesus,
Hmm,
we've seen this as
okay.
pastors in ministry and whatever, that offense has become a common thing in the church.
So true.
So what should be the attitude of the church, of a fully devoted follower of Jesus? I think it's uh I don't think it's realistic to think that at some point, as you walk with Jesus, you're going to be around people. Things are going to happen that are not maybe the way they're supposed to happen, or people are going to
Mhm.
say things, they're going to do things that are not representative of the value system of the kingdom. Everybody's going to have an opportunity to be offended at some point. So the
Very true.
question is, as believers of Jesus, as followers of Jesus, how do we resist this temptation of offense that is so prevalent in our world today?
That's so good, man. I think two scriptures kinda jump out to me. Um, First, I think it's important and for a I would say for a deeper from a discipleship standpoint. First, I think it's very, very, very appropriate and important, as you mentioned about disciples, that if we're going to make disciples, we have to first be the disciple. I think much of that, the reason why that is so important is because, much of what Jesus taught was that, blessed are you when people revile you. They say all manner of evil against you falsely for my name's sake. People reject you, whatever. And so I think it's important for us to recognize that Jesus didn't create some type of, I don't know, utopian view that, all your troubles are going to go away. I mean, in fact, in some way, Jesus basically suggested or insinuated that by following him, you may be increasing your troubles,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And for a treatment on this, because it's so important as disciples, we have to be our lives have to be so saturated with the transformation, and we have to be such kingdom citizens
Mm-hmm.
that the things that would normally offend us, I think that's a good place to start. Like, I think as humans, being offended is normal.
Yeah.
I think it's a developmental process that you get to the place where things that would normally offend you do not. The apostle,
So
the
good, man.
right, the Old Testament. I think it was the psalmist, maybe David, who said, "Great peace have they that love thy law, and nothing shall offend them." And the reason why great peace, why great peace have they that love thy law? Because you trust in the fact that God will ultimately judge the world by it. That I don't have to make a judgment about this. I don't have to make a judgment. In other words, I don't have to defend myself. He's my defender.
Yeah.
I don't have to feel like they're attacking me. I think this is, God told the children of Israel in the Old Testament. He says, listen, the battle is not yours. The battle is mine. God's saying that I think God's saying it both in an ideological and in a practical way. When he said the battle is not yours, the battle is mine, I think literally, Chris, God is saying that in a practical sense, hey, I'm going to give you the power. I'm going to give you the strength. My spirit's going to come in the midst of you. This is my battle. I'm going to help you win it. But I also think that God's saying the reason why the enemy's coming after you, the reason why you find yourself at the receiving end of so much of these attacks is because they hate me.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
Jesus and
Sure.
Jesus reiterates that concept in the New Testament when he says, "Don't be surprised when they hate you, because they first hated me and they hated the prophets." So he's saying, don't be offended. Don't be offended,
Yeah.
because they're not attacking you. They're attacking what you stand for. And I think this is a piece of discipleship that's so vital for us to even be able to personally not be offended, so that we can engage with people in a conversation that might be offensive to them and it not become a back and forth confrontation.
Man, that's so good, bro. That's so good. Jesus said so in John Bevere's great book, Bait of Satan, which is a great resource,
Bro, that's what I was going to say.
right? I
I
mean, it's
said
a
for discipleship, I started to say, here's a good book. And I went right over the top. Thank you for The Bait of Satan, John Bevere. Very good.
yeah, tremendous book. And he talks about, one of the foundational concepts is Luke 17:1. Jesus said to his disciples, it's impossible, but offenses will come.
That's it.
I mean, he made it abundantly clear, just like we know in this life, you will have tribulation. In this life, you will have an opportunity to be offended. And the word, one of the things that Bevere brings out is that word in Luke 17:1 for offenses is the word scandalon, right? Which you've talked about scandalon, and ultimately, it's obviously where we get our word scandal, and it literally means a trap.
It's
So
it's
if
it's the it's isn't the scandalon the the scandalon is the part of the trap that holds the bait.
yes, holds the bait.
Yeah. Wow.
Exactly.
Hence the
And
name,
so
the bait of Satan, right?
correct. That's the whole deal.
Yeah.
And so I think what we should so when I started out and I said, I misspoke and said the spirit of offense. I didn't mean that. I meant the spirit of the age. I think there is an influence of the enemy that is trapping people into this attitude and this mindset of offense, because when you're offended, there is no peace, there is no hope, there is no vitality in life. Everything is a reaction and a response against something, because you've been lured into this trap of offense. And this is why the power of grace and mercy and the power of forgiveness, right? As disciples of Jesus, we have a duty and a responsibility to release debt, not because somebody else deserves it, not because they've earned it, but I forgive because I've been forgiven. And in comparison to what I've been forgiven, whatever somebody else has done to me is not even remotely close to being compared to what I've been forgiven.
Wow.
And so the power of forgiveness as disciples of Jesus, this has to become, bro, I feel very strongly about this.
Yes.
This has to be an everyday part of our lives, because you will have an opportunity to be offended by something that somebody says, something that somebody preaches, something that somebody does to you. And at the end of the day, when you become offended, you've relinquished control of everything in your life over to that person and what they have done to you. And turning from victim mentality into victor mentality is recognizing and realizing I'm not held bound by what is done to me. I have the ability to choose how things are done. We've seen people that have taken great tragedies, horrible things that have been done to people that have been misused, people that have been abused, people that have been talked about and hurt and whatever. And they take that, and through the power of the grace and mercy of God, they turn that into a powerful testimony of forgiveness and release and peace. And bro, that's where vitality in living for Jesus. There is no vitality in getting sucked into the trap of offense.
So true. And what's interesting is I think that it's interesting because every human system is actually frail.
Sure.
It's interesting because, you think about the Tower of Babel, and humans built the Tower of Babel because they didn't want to be vulnerable.
Right.
They
Absolutely. Because they just come out of the flood.
There you go.
Right.
So their idea was, if God ever tries to do this again, we'll just climb the Tower of Babel and the flood won't get us.
Absolutely. That's what it was.
So we won't be vulnerable.
100%. Right.
And so what they did was they built
That's
a
so
tower.
good, bro.
But the Tower of Babel was, even though functionally the Tower of Babel as a structure was a structure to remove their the capacity of vulnerability against the judgment of God. That structure symbolized a deeper cultural move.
Yes.
It was, in other words, it was a response of something that was inside them. It was a response to their feelings, their view, we don't ever want to have to become vulnerable to that kind of judgment anymore. And so there was a societal structure that was built there. If you go back and you really study that out, and I don't want to get real deep into that, but the main players in that, and you could go even to the New Testament when it talks about mystery Babylon, and it was, there's just so much, there's so much in there about this idea that the Tower of Babel was not just simply a structural edifice to remove vulnerability, but it was also an expression of a new cultural system.
Sure.
And that new cultural system was a system that says we don't want to be vulnerable to God, and therefore we put off his rule over us.
Mm-hmm.
And so the mindset and the mentality was we're going to rule ourselves. That was the heart of Nimrod. The rule of King Nimrod in Babel was, we're going to rule ourselves. And so, but the Bible says, but that there's great serious flaw and weakness. So as they're trying to remove their vulnerability, which is our sense of weakness, it actually embedded a culture or sociological weakness, which was their fear of God.
Yes.
And so they responded to that. And so they were going to throw off his governance. They were going to throw off, we're going to worship what we want to worship. We're not going to. And what's interesting, Chris, is that to me, in the day in which we live, so much of the offense is actually a sign of mental and emotional frailty, to
Sure.
not be able to, even like you said, that story about Lila Rose, when she was the person that was asking those questions, you couldn't even handle it, to
Yeah.
hear somebody say something that I hate so bad. That is a sign of frailty. That's
Mhm.
a fragility. That's being fragile.
Sure.
So,
Sure. Absolutely. Well, and from the believer standpoint, the Tower of Babel ultimately was an expression of unbelief
mhm,
because God said he gave them the sign in the sky, the rainbow,
yeah,
right? The
yeah.
sign in the sky that I'll never do
I'll never
this
do this
again.
again. Right.
The promise was I'm never going to flood the earth again, and yet they're like you said, kind of that frailty
Yeah,
and that fear produced that unbelief in them, and so
yeah.
what
We don't believe
happens is
God. I don't believe God.
I don't believe his
Well, have you ever
promises.
seen a rainbow before?
Right.
What? No, but I don't know. I just don't know if God could be trusted. Which, by the way, hey, bait of Satan. I don't know if God could be trusted, even the
Yeah,
garden.
right.
Right? It's that devil's never changed his ploy, really.
That's the whole thing, and so right, so even so okay, so for us, if there are places where we are offended, where we have offense in us,
Mhm.
ultimately, those are expressions of unbelief, and what happens is we build things that are designed to protect us. That's what the Tower of Babel. You nailed it so perfectly. That's something that's designed to find a way to protect me, and so dysfunctional behavior finds a way. So whatever that expression is, some people get really aggressive. Some people kind of withdraw and build walls around themselves. Some people become that person that like overly gregarious because they
Yeah.
want to eliminate all that kind of stuff. And so all of those kinds of things, when we have that offense, it's an unbelief that produces a need that we
Mhm.
feel we recognize the protection should have been of God. The
Right.
rainbow is the protection of God. I don't need to do anything because I trust in his protection. And when we do that, when we are offended, we start building these structures in our lives or these mindsets, these attitudes or whatever they are of ways that we've got to learn how to protect ourselves. And that ultimately is an expression of unbelief. And
Mhm.
there's no way, bro, there's no way that we're going to be able to convince a world that has heightened sensitivity, right? That
Mhm.
has thrown off and has rejected when you see somebody that's talking about, you know, pro-life versus pro-abortion, and you have these two different deals. What is that? That's an expression of I don't like I don't like the value system of God. And so I'm going to create my own system and I'm going to throw this off. And it's an expression that becomes an expression of their unbelief.
Mhm.
If we match their hostility with our hostility, what difference is that?
No, it actually just reveals, because the hostility is always, man. I'm If you could, folks, if you could make it through the first 5 or 10 minutes of our podcast, you'll really will get some really awesome stuff. But
What, you didn't like the cat conversation?
no, I'm just saying. Um, it just didn't it didn't speak to what was potentially coming. Um, but here's what's so crazy, Chris, is that um, in counseling, one of the things that that you talk about in counseling, that's discussed, is that when people are when they're vulnerable, when they try to remove vulnerability, like you were talking about earlier, when people are trying to remove vulnerability, when they're trying to not feel fragile or weak, um, that's when actually the hostility begins. In fact, anger, there are many psychologists that suggest that anger is the result of feeling that things are out of your control. Isn't that
Interesting.
interesting?
That's very interesting,
Like,
bro.
where does anger come from? Anger is the result. So what do you get angry about? Why do you get angry? Because somebody did something you didn't like, because somebody did something that you didn't want, because somebody's right. Anger is when you feel like, or at the root of it, true anger, a person who is like, I'm not even saying like angry because that person threw out your food that you put in the fridge, right?
Right,
So
right.
let's say you had food in the fridge, and somebody went to the refrigerator and they threw out the food that you put in the fridge that you were going to take to as your lunch today. And somebody, and it was just in a bag, they didn't know, and they're cleaning out the refrigerator. They took the fridge and they threw it away, and all of a sudden, a big fight ensues. Why'd you throw away my lunch? You threw I put it in there to, and then all this. And where does that anger come from? Something happened that you didn't like, some outcome that you didn't like, and it's a sense of that there's you couldn't control that. Now, that's one piece. When a person is angry, in other words, somebody says, I'm dealing with anger issues, an
Right.
a almost a what's the word I'm thinking of, systemic, just anger. Like, people are saying, I'm just
Yes,
angry all
deep.
the time,
Right, right,
right?
right.
That's when psychologists say that is a result of, in fact, the questions that you ask when somebody says, I just feel like angry all the time. Well, what are some things in your life that you feel are out of control? Or what are some things, or maybe in a better way, what are some things that you wish that you could control better?
Hmm.
What are some things in your life that you wish you can control better? Well, I wish I could control my boss because my boss is a blah, 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 and he does blah, blah, blah. And I wish I could control my kids because my kids are good. And I wish, and all of a sudden, when all those things swirl around them that they don't feel like they can control. So I think this is interesting because there's so much hostility that's been cultivated against Christianity. They're dangerous. They believe these things. They're responsible for all the wars in the world and da 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 and all the crazy stuff that you hear. Nobody talks about the fact that actually hospitals are actually a result of churches saying we have a divine dictate to care for the sick and the hurting. Right?
Right, right.
Nobody talks about hospitals being sort of a Christian product. But anyway, so I'm just wondering there about this idea. Maybe I've thrown it out. I'm not trying to make a conclusive statement. I'm just throwing that to you to say, do you believe that over time, over a long period of time, there's been, it's almost like somebody had a shirt on, somebody had a MAGA hat on, and a guy hit him. He's in a coma or whatever, in a hospital in New York City because somebody saw a MAGA hat and just walked up and just sucker punched a guy, and he's got a concussion, got a bleeding brain, because a bleed on the brain because he had an offensive hat on. Or no matter what you think about, like somebody says, has a shirt that says all lives matter, and somebody comes up, at a mall and
Right.
just punches you in the face because why did you do that? Because of your shirt. And it's like, bro, have we really gotten there as a
Yeah.
culture?
Right,
You see what I'm saying?
right. No,
But it's
absolutely.
hostility, it's anger, and it's cultivated, and it's a desire to say, I will control it by eliminating you.
Exactly. Exactly. I apologize if you can hear a fan. Somebody turned a fan on here, so hopefully my sound is not too terrible. So I apologize
Oh, good.
if that's the case. But no, you mentioned something there that I think is really interesting. We've seen the rise of like OCD and all of that kind of stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
And I think, and again, I don't want to I don't want to minimize certain things, and there's no way we can do an exhaustive conversation and discussion on
No.
that. But the reality is, control is an illusion,
So
right?
true.
Control is an illusion, and most of my dealings with people that wrestle with, some components of OCD, it's the feeling what you're talking about, that there's a realization that there are things that are beyond their control, and so they become hyper focused on controlling what they can control, right?
So good.
And so certainly we understand, there are a lot of components with all of this kind of stuff, and we can't just do it all. But at the end of the day, a lot of it can come back to, you know again, the question: do we trust the Lord? Can we trust the Lord? And allowing some discipleship things in our lives to recognize and realize, if we're dealing with this stuff, if we're dealing with anger, if we're dealing with OCD, if we're dealing with some of these things, then we have a responsibility, first and foremost, to allow the working of His Spirit and the working of His Word to identify
Yes.
what is the place in us that's driving that, right?
So good, dude.
Right. And I do think, man, I do think this is such an important conversation, because the gospel of Jesus is designed to transform us so that we're not just like the world in every area and in
Mm.
every capacity, right? And if all we're doing is matching their level of hostility,
Mhm.
then yes, the gospel is going to confront certain places. And people that love the darkness they're gonna do everything they can to defend the darkness. And like you said, they're gonna hate you because they hate me. There's gonna be an attitude among many that just hate the things of Jesus, and
Yep.
therefore they're gonna take that out on the people of God. And I think for us, number one, in our personal lives, we gotta go back to discipleship, being the disciple, letting Jesus change places in us that doesn't produce what you're talking about. And if we're being honest, I use this deal this weekend, in Virginia. I'm like, all of us, all of us have places that are not like Jesus, and
Yep.
we've done great harm by telling people that you graduate from discipleship, because until Jesus comes, or until I leave this world, there are places in me that are not like Him.
Right.
And I'm like, I can think, man, I'm doing really good. I got a lot of things under control, and I'm doing really good. And then I'll drive to church on a Sunday morning and have to go through 4 roundabouts, and the Lord just really reminds me real quick, like these morons can't operate a roundabout. Like, dude, I've got some, pin up frustration and pin up anger, and there's some places that I need Jesus to come and transform me. And so I think it has to start with us, and this is why, bro, this is why we're so passionate about this. We have to experience that transformation personally, and so that our stories become not what Jesus did for me back in, bless God, 1984, but what Jesus is doing for me right now, in a season and in a world that is being overwhelmed with fear,
Yeah.
overwhelmed with anger, overwhelmed with hostility, overwhelmed with offense. There ought to be something different about God's people, that people can look at us and say, why are you not overreacting like everybody else is?
Yeah. I said Sunday, I made the statement. I said, if your response to the situations at work, if your response to the controversy that's brewing, at your work or in your neighborhood or whatever, if your response is the same as the godless people at your work or in your neighborhood, why would anybody think that they need what you've got?
Why? Why?
And that's the thing, that's why we hammer so hard here. Look, okay, warning, the next statement I'm going to make is going to be offensive. Okay? That's why, Chris, that the um uh cultural Christianity is so dangerous, that people could feel like,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely, bro.
The people could feel like they're okay believing the right things and checking off the boxes that the church culture says, are you doing these things? Are you not doing these things? Are you showing up to church faithfully? Are you paying your tithes? Are you okay, well then you're a disciple, right? But in the real world, the way that you handle stress, the way you handle trouble, the way you handle the controversy that's brewing about this decision that was made and whatever, and they find you responding just like every other person there responds, then why would they why would they look at you and go, well, you know? And I think the other thing that is, I think, is important as we think about these things, to highlight something that you said, I think is worthy of repeating, is that you mentioned about that control is an illusion, which is
Yeah.
precisely why Jesus said, you know, he tells us in his word, you know, don't say tomorrow I'm going to do this and tomorrow I'm going to do that. He said, but rather say if the Lord wills. Why? Because Jesus said you can't control tomorrow. You
Right.
don't know what tomorrow brings.
You
And
don't
so,
know.
so the Bible, so here's the deal. To truly be a disciple is to
Yeah.
truly believe that I only have the ability to control who I am and what I do in this very moment. I can't control what somebody else does
So
in an
true,
hour
man.
from now. I can't control what kind of challenges are going to rise against me tomorrow. And so these are the things that so in a you know, a gospel fluency conversation, when a person is, you know, stressed about what could happen tomorrow, or, you know, a fear about what is impending, they may be extrapolating what they know about today, and they may be projecting it in tomorrow. And Jesus says, okay, first of all, I'm in your tomorrow already, number one.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And no temptation is taken you such as common to man, but God will with the temptation make a way of escape. And so nothing's going to come against you that you're not able to bear. And God says, the only things that will come against you are the things that will perfect my work in you.
Yeah.
I got you. I got you.
Right.
So the question is, what don't you believe about that? Now
Absolutely.
that's offensive, isn't it? You know,
Right. That
and people go, "Oh, everybody has fear. You think nobody has fear? You think nobody gets?" And see, that's when the hostility. Because why? Because they're trying to defend this the indefensible.
you made a statement when we were in our prep that I thought was so good. And that is, you know, again, we've got to live this out. We've got to live questionable lives. It's got to be from us first. If we're going to know how to deal with people, then it's got to start with us first. And the first thing is we've got to allow the word and the spirit to confront places in our lives.
That's right.
We may not like it. It's going to challenge us, but how do you respond when you're confronted with some things and you recognize and realize there's some things about me that are not like Jesus or whatever? How do we respond in that moment? And that is, I think, a place that, you know, and again, I want to be careful how I word this. I'm not saying that we should be, you know, that confrontation is not necessarily conflict. I'm not saying that we should be like in your face, stick it up your nose. But the truth is, if there's not some level of confrontation about those things, we'll see no need to change. We'll see no desire to change. But the Spirit of God and the Word of God comes up. I mentioned this. This weekend in Portsmouth. You know what produced the Acts 2:38 message. Peter stands up
Yeah.
to the same public that it was just responsible for the crucifixion of Jesus.
Yeah.
And Peter stands up and basically says this: you've waited for Messiah for generations.
Yep.
Your fathers have prophesied it. You've waited for him to come. He comes fulfilling every prophecy, healing everything, walking in shoe leather. He's doing everything that
The Messiah
identifies
was
him as
supposed to
Messiah.
do. Yeah.
Right. And you killed him.
Yep. Yeah.
That's what you did. You've been waiting for him for generations and you killed him.
Yep.
And that confrontation that produced the response that says they were pricked in their hearts and said, what do we do? And it produced the message, the new birth message. The key was stuck into the lock, turn the lock, open the door for the New Testament, the new covenant relationship for people to enter in. And that again, so again, we've become, the attractional model has become, you know, motivational speeches.
Yeah.
It's becoming
Right.
just and I
Because
believe in encouragement. I
because
believe in all of that, but
because their form of church growth is get them to come and keep them coming until we can string enough services together that we can get them in a growth track, and then we can get them plugged in, and we can make them a member.
yeah.
And so we can't say anything that really offends them, because then they won't keep coming back, and then how will we grow?
Right. And the confrontation of the gospel, again, it goes back to the trust thing, right? The confrontation of the gospel is to show us a better way. The way of Jesus is a better way. And so Jesus confronts us with things so that we'll know the better way, and then God gives us the opportunity. He asked the rich young ruler, he brings confrontation. You have a place in your life that is going to come in between you and me. So what you need to do is you need to go sell everything that you have and give it to the poor. It seems so unfair, but he was confronting the rich young ruler's love for his riches and positions or whatever else was associated with that. And Jesus said, if you're going to follow me, you got to leave all of that behind. He confronted that. And Jesus was kind enough and loving enough and compassionate enough to just bring him to a place of decision. You have an opportunity. You get to choose what you want to do. He's never going to force us. He's never going to make us do it. But he, in his loving compassion, he confronts the places that will hinder us from being everything that God has called us to be and everything that he wants us to experience. He'll confront those in us and then say, now you have an opportunity to choose.
Yep. Golly, that's so good, dude. And I think, and that's the thing, I think that when we look at, look at this idea, I love what, Jay Jones said, we only try to control what we feel like God isn't in control of, right? What
Sure.
we feel like God is in control of. That's why we walk by faith and not by sight. And, and I think also this idea too, and I think this goes along, Chris, a little bit with disciple making, because it's easy to be offended at the caricature of the real,
Sure.
right? Not the
Sure.
real, but sort of the caricatured
I was
version.
going to go here.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think this is important, and I'll make this statement and throw it back at you then. But I think that's why I made this statement. I said fear of conflict produces codified assumptions that go unsubstantiated. In other words, I think they said that because I think that person said that to me because blah, blah, blah. And now you make an assumption, but because you're afraid of conflict, because conflict is bad, and the kinds of crazy crud that conflict causes. So I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to ask them, hey, why did you say that? I'm not going to address that, because they might get offended, and then, and then all that whole rigmarole. And so what happens now? Your unsubstantiated assumptions get codified in your mind as the caricature of them.
Sure.
And if you don't sit down and have dinner, if you don't talk, if you don't sit down with a cup of coffee or whatever it is that you enjoy drinking, if you don't just sit down with them and just say, hey, I want to talk to you about something. If you don't get a chance to get to know them, if you don't create any kind of relationship, it's easy for you to continue in your caricatured version of what you think they are.
And that's, it is so true, man. It's so easy to get amped up and full of angst over social media, people that we don't know. You get a snippet into their world through social media and whatever. And we get all riled up about that. So, man, I agree 100%. The other thing I was going to say too was, we're not advocating for, like just being mean or
confrontationalism.
Just like preaching that's like bless God. No, we're not talking about that. And that's where I refuse to let things that are biblical that get misused. What we do is we swing on the pendulum and we eliminate those, right? So because you've had people that have misused that and they become abusive in some ways.
That's
We know
right.
the conversation about spiritual abuse and all that, and we swing on the pendulum. No, we need to come back to the center of truth. And
Yeah.
Jesus had the ability to present confrontational things in such a way that it extracted out kind of that personal feeling and emotion, and just confronted, this is where you are, and this is the truth, and you need to decide what you're going to do with it. And I think sometimes we've allowed our emotions to overtake us. I'm talking about like leaders and preachers and pastors. Sometimes is we've allowed our emotions to overtake us sometimes, and we can do that confrontation in such a way that is has some element of our own personal angst in it, and
There you go, bro.
that's not healthy. That's not productive. So we're not saying just confront and be confrontational and just stir up conflict. Bless God, and that's how we're saying no. Let the gospel drive that, and we have a responsibility to produce that in such a way that gives that person the ability, like the rich young ruler. What did Jesus say or what does it say about the rich young ruler? Jesus loved him. He walked away, and Jesus loved him.
Yeah.
Right? That's the spirit that we've got to have. Speak the truth in love. So I know we're going along, bro. You want to wrap it up?
Let me just say this one final thing. I'll throw it back to you for wrap up. I'm so thankful for this journey personally, because back when I was an attractional church growth pastor.
Okay.
Just thinking that, man, if I could just preach good enough, if we could have church good enough, if we could just make the programs at the building and the experience so stinking amazing that people would be like, I'm never leaving this place. It built up a false facade, an unbiblical facade. That's not what the church is.
Sure.
And it was built off of wrong values.
There you go.
Chris, I'm going to tell you something that I told my wife the other day, and this is a confession about what I was when I first started planting this church. I wanted people saved. I wanted our church to grow because I didn't want this effort of leaving Houston and come here to the Dayton area and planting a church to fail.
Absolutely. I feel that.
I didn't want the church plant to fail. I wanted the church. Now, I was happy when people got deliverance. I was happy when people got saved. I was excited for them. I whatever. I was excited when they got, baptized and their sins washed away. They got the Holy Ghost. I was excited for people.
Sure.
But at the back of my mind, the satisfaction was that's one step closer to making sure that we don't fail.
Yeah.
And bro, God had to deliver me from that.
Absolutely.
So I just want to throw that out, that God had to deliver me from that so that my new values could be, because here's the thing, because I had a very vulnerable position, and the vulnerability was fragile and it was weak because it wasn't built on Jesus.
Sure.
It was all hinging on me. It was all hinging on the church. It was all hinging on these people. So why did I get mad at people when they caused trouble in the church? Why did I get mad at them? Because they threatened. They jeopardized the goal.
So good.
And so so the confrontation that I had with people, when it got bad enough that because I didn't want to have confrontation, because I didn't want people to get upset and leave. And so rather than confronting things that probably needed to be confronted, I kind of let some of those things go early on. And then, bro, and then when it finally got so bad that I'm like, you know what, I've got to take this on. And I don't care if they leave or not because they're causing too much trouble. It wasn't about them. It was about the fact that I've got to get them out of this because they could jeopardize what we're trying to do here. And Chris, I'm telling you, when I became a disciple,
yes,
this is an absolute confession I'm making today on our podcast, that when I became a true disciple as a pastor,
Yeah.
I began to say, you know what? And God was trying to do this in me, Chris. He said, because God spoke a word to me many years ago, and this was the start of my journey. It was probably 10 years ago. The Lord spoke to me and said, I didn't call you to grow a church. I called you to grow people. You grow people, and the people will become fruitful, and the church will grow. You've got it backwards, but I didn't know the alternative. I didn't know what else to
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
so I'm just going to say, I'm just so thankful for this. I'm thankful that I let God confront that. I'm so thankful that I didn't defend against that, even to God.
So good, man. And I think that is going to resonate with so many people. I said something similar this weekend, that if I'm being really honest, that I viewed people as the product.
Yeah.
They just happened to be the means to the end of what I wanted, which was success.
Wow.
Right? I needed that
Wow.
affirmation. And so same thing. Anything that threatened that affirmation, it became a threat. And so you start applying the fight, flight, or freeze principle,
Yep.
right? Anything that's a threat, you start applying that, whatever your tendency happens to
Yes.
be. And I think, if we're being honest, for a lot of us leaders, that's the thing that we deal with. And this is why this discipleship piece, bro, the freedom and the liberty that comes from that realization is
Oh,
absolute. You can't overstate how freeing that mentality is. And so, man, thank you for being transparent and sharing that, because I think that's going to resonate with a lot of pastors, a lot of leaders today. So, man, what a great conversation. I think it's, we try to be I want to say relevant, but we try to be to demonstrate how you can discuss discipleship in a relevant way, how it applies to every component, every aspect of lives. And I think today was a conversation I think reflected that and represented that. Don't you, Ken?
yes, sir. Yeah, very
100%.
much
So
so.
we appreciate everybody jumping on and being a part of the conversation. A ton of great comments today. I mean, some
Absolutely.
really great comments on social
Fabulous.
media. We certainly appreciate that. Appreciate you being a part. And we are excited about what God is doing through the Mobilized Church Network and the Dillingham Group. Keep us in your prayers. We definitely would appreciate it. You can help us out by going to social media, like, share, rate, all those good things on the podcast platforms. Do all that stuff. Help us out. And we will look forward to coming back to you next Tuesday around 10 o'clock-ish, something around there. We'll be back, something like that. So we look forward to that. Until then, go live mobilized.